Welcome to the Vigor Life Podcast, a source of inspiration, lessons, stories, skill sets, mindsets, and strategies to invigorate and expand all areas of your life. Let's go. Hey, what's going on? Coach Luka back here with the Vigor Life Podcast today. I guess we always got a special edition talking about something, but because lately I've been on this coaching trip and leadership trip, and I think because a lot of the things that I do in real life kind of end up relating back to what I talk about on the podcast. So it's a combination between, things that, the messages that I get, the phone calls that I have, which I have tons of in all of my coaching programs, things that happen inside of the gym with my team, with clients, things of that nature. And then, the things that spark are the things that I'll talk about a lot on a podcast. And today I'm going to talk about both like leadership influence, influencing people, building people up. So it comes into play with everything, right? So funny things, I was just up in Vancouver. I went up for this Superhuman Summit and really to hang out with one of my friends, Sean Stevenson, who has the Model Health Show, which is the #1 health podcast in America. You should check him out. Like, this amazing work. So really, I kind of went up there for the Superhuman Summit, but really I wanted to spend some time with him and catch up and, talk shop, talk life, talk business. It was a great trip because of that. And I'm going to kind of wheel that back in. I know every podcast I talk about relationship, how important that is. But I also want to share, how that looks like in my life. I'll, jump in a car, drive 3 hours, spend a day and a half there just to do that and build that. But to bring it back to the point, what I liked about it is because something that we're working on doing here at Vigor, which is we're building this symbiotic environment, right? We have Fit Bar, we have physical therapy, we have training, we have movement practice, we have nutrition coaching. We're putting in a recovery room with a cryo chamber, compression stuff. And right now we're working on some other stuff that I'm not going to disclose yet, but it really is kind of like the symbiotic environment. We're also trying to bring in some doctors and things of that nature that are more holistically kind of driven, so that it can be a puzzle piece, like can be a fit in the puzzle piece that we're building. And so when I was at the Superhuman Summit, one of the doctors was speaking. What I loved about it was because of this kind of bringing it back to, what they realize is obviously the key. It's like these components, so they found the 5 components that really help people, transition or should I say transform their health, like just inside out. We're talking about everything. We're not talking about just, fat loss and weight loss and looking good. We're talking just about quality of life, well-being, right? And it was, not to dig deep too much into the science of it, because it was like, hey, this is how many factors we found were genetic, and it's like 23%. And then it was all these other factors, and so many were behavior-based, environment-based. And they broke it down to 5 different things. And it was exercise, nutrition, mindfulness, stress. So that's what the third one was under. Number 4 was purpose. And number 5 was relationships, right? So it was those 5 that were like these huge drivers when it comes to behaviors and environment and change. And when you think about that, purpose and relationships, like how much of your life is obviously influenced by that. Also like mindfulness and stress, like how much, because if you think about it, it's all connected, right? But like if you have a business or you're part of a business, you're part of any company, right? Every day you're spending 8, 10, 12 hours or more. If you're an entrepreneur, it's going to be even more than that, connecting and relating with these people. So it's like if your relationships are strained, there's going to be a lot of stress, right? If it's going to affect your environment, if it affects your purpose, it affects a lot of different things. And so I wanted to come back to, because one of the, once again, this is all connected. So if I'm telling a story, I'm going to bring it back to the main point. We're just having another awesome intern start, Zaray, and I kind of do this recommendation. What's the foundation of being here at Vigor? And the first book is How to Win Friends and Influence People. And, that's a perennial seller. I talk about perennial sellers in businesses a lot, which is another great book by Ryan Holiday, which is like things that stand a test of time. That book stood a test of time because what it teaches is so important. Building relationships, like, treating people the right way, by being a true leader and influencing in a proper way. And so I wanted to bring it back and just have some like big ideas from that book. Or should I just say like the lessons that I got from that book? Like I said, there's so many, but just some. And then I'm going to transition if we have some time into some other big lessons from another book that I've been really heavily influenced by when it comes to leadership and team building lately, and that's Radical Candor. But with that said, like here's just some points that I wanted to make. Number one, nobody can go at it alone. As much as I like the image of the self-made man, I mean, you are self-made, right? Because it's the choices that you make. But we can never forget that we really are not. Like there's so many people in our lives that are, I would say, the reason that we are the way that we are, good and bad, right? You have people that kind of, I don't know, beat you down, but it's like taught you lessons. You end up learning lessons in the pit to come out on top, right? To get stronger, to become more resilient, to overcome, right? But our life is, I think Arnold Schwarzenegger said it so well. It was like, hey, you know what? Like, man, like we're made up of all these different people around us that mold us, lift us up, bring us down, but mold us, make us tougher, make us learn and grow. So to accomplish anything great in life, you need the help of skilled, loyal, and creative people in your life. That's just the reality. And I think if you're a business owner or you know what, if anybody, right? Like you can and should become better at like recognizing these people and their skill sets, and I should say these attributes that I just mentioned, so that you can have more of them in your life. And that's one of my goals too here at Vigor, right? Is to have those. And I would say your virtues and the way that you live your life will determine a lot of what you attract into your life. This is just reality. I mean, we can, if you're, you have to always look at yourself. And I talked about this in the last podcast, right? About how many times you're mirroring your own fears and judgments and stereotypes onto others, right? About yourself. So you always got to work on yourself. But know this, like leadership and influence are learnable traits, right? So if you know what to pay attention to and what to look out for, you can lead just about anyone. And you got to first understand, like, you don't need permission to be a leader. You just have to act, right? You have to act like a leader, right? Action determines it. Like reading books and doing all this stuff, if you're not acting on it, is irrelevant, right? And so you always have to think about this, that like, these are all learned skill sets, like communication, emotional intelligence, right? It's people think like, oh man, you're just naturally so this, that, or the other. You're a natural leader. There is no such thing. I mean, we could talk about like some people are, had environments around them that made them that way more so, but everything can be learned. So that's what I love about this. And that's why that first book that everybody reads when they become an intern at Vigor is so important. It's the foundation, right? Because no matter your place in the hierarchy, like everyone's a leader, right? You have the ability to literally change your work environment just by changing yourself. And that, another one of the books, and I love books and I love reading and stuff, but really it's just the knowledge that you get from that you apply it that matters, is, The Leader with No Title, which is another one of the books that is part of the curriculum here at Vigor, because it's that mentality that like, hey, you can make decisions here. And it's like, as long as you understand our values, like being a go-giver, right? Making this the best part of our client's day, like going above and beyond, being a problem solver, right? Like the thing is, rather than going like, oh, let me ask this person, let me ask that person. No, make that decision from a leadership position. Like, hey, what's going to solve this person's problem? What's going to help them get results? What's going to make them feel amazing? Hey, what's going to create that moment for them, right? And we'll talk another time about the power of moments and how you can actually create them in people's lives, whether it's in your business, whether it's for family, friends, things like that. Just amazing times that help people experience a better life. So, with that said, big idea number one, don't complain or condemn. And, know this, like no one likes a complainer. No one likes someone who's negative. You think about life and just like, oh man, I really want to be around that person. They always complain. Like it doesn't happen, right? And like attracts like, and the other way around. So, complainers attract complainers. Once again, you have the power to change that environment, right? Whether it's stepping outside of it or becoming influential enough where you redirect and reframe the conversation. So, what to do. Focus on people's good side. Give honest compliments. Like, don't be disingenuous, but don't hold back. And it starts with you, right? Like, when PN talks about unconditional positive regard, like shining a light, like this is a learned skill, like shining a light on things that are positive, because you have to train yourself to find them, right? Where our brain is kind of trained to think, not negative, but look for problems, right? Like that's who we are as human beings, right? Find problem, solve problem, repeat, you know what I mean? And so we have to train ourselves, especially with other people and relationships and teams and things of that nature, on finding positive things, because we know that like that actually helps people grow, right? So that's big idea number one. Do not complain or condemn. Then we got idea number two is actually be interested. So know this: to get people to like or listen to you, they need to feel like you care about them, which means you need to actually care about them. And Martin was the first person Martin Rooney was the first person that was like, hey, to be interesting, you have to be interested. I've probably brought it up on the podcast before, but it is so important, right? Like that everybody, like, I don't give a shit if you have a script. Like right now I'm building all these systems out or should I say rebuilding these systems out for Vigor, and which is really, really important for any business. But the thing is, like, if you give somebody a script, right, or a sales script, or customer service, a kind of like handbook, that doesn't mean that like they'll have great customer service, because at the end of the day, you still need to care, right? And people can tell if you care, right? So what to do? Well, when you're interacting with someone, concentrate on them, right? Concentrate on them. Ask yourself, how can this person teach me something? Why is this person interesting? Remember, the quality of our lives is determined by the quality of the questions we ask ourselves. So write these two down, okay? I'm gonna take a sip of my Bang. That's still not sponsoring me. What the fuck? But and as I take a sip of this, write those two down. Two questions, like what to do to be interested. What are the questions that you want to frame? And that is like, how can this person teach me something? And why is this person interesting? And go. All right. So you got those written down, like keep them in your pocket. So any meeting that you have, when you come in, like ask yourself that, because the reality is our insecurities make us want to tell people how much we know, right? Like they're talking and I'm essentially just waiting to tell them like all the stuff that I know. I'm so smart. I can help you so much. I'm the guy, I'm the man, woo, right? And this reframes stuff differently. How can this person teach me something? Why is this person interesting? And the crazy part about it is when you do that, like legitimately, you'll be like amazed by how much you didn't know about people and how awesome they are. And like, you'll find all these great things about them. Big idea number 3 is ask lots of questions. Like, man, the last 2 shows, essentially, I probably brought up like tons of different questions. It's interesting that I'm just completing my kind of my whole sales handbook blueprint, whatever the hell you want to call it, for our team. And it's like, it's a lot of questions, right? So many questions. I get a team going like, damn, that's a lot of questions. I'm like, absolutely, want to find out a lot about people, right? So know this, people like to answer questions about themselves. It makes them feel important. I know I do. Shit, like when people ask me stuff, I'm like, oh, great, let me talk about myself, right? Look, we're all human, right? We're all human, and just having awareness of that. But just know that, and you want to know as much as possible about people, because if you're coaching in any realm, I don't care if it's, like I said, fitness, health, wellness, business, marketing, I don't like real estate, whatever, right? Like the more you know, the more information you have to be able to help that person, right? So what to do when talking to someone? Ask as many questions as possible. Go down a rabbit hole with them. Get to know them as deeply as possible. And I've wrote about or talked about a lot of questions that are very helpful in this realm. But just have this foundation, right? Like when you're going into any type of conversation or trying to build a relationship, just ask a lot of questions. And then what's the follow-up to that? Number 4 is listen, right? Know this, you can't cultivate a legitimate connection with someone if you don't take the effort to listen to them. Like truly listen to them, right? Not just hear, but listen. And, so what to do when you're in a conversation, like be in a conversation, be present, listen intently, try to learn something in every encounter, right? So we're going back to that thing, right? That's why I wanted to frame that question, like try to learn something in every encounter. That's very, very important. And for you to do that, listen. And what I've started doing is, because this helps me keep me accountable to that, right? If I'm talking to someone, whether it's a new person or even a person that I've known, I try to find out something new about them, and then I'll write it down on a 4x6, and then I put it in a journal. And sometimes more so, like I said, that's there for me to not go back maybe and look at it, but it's like to make sure that I'm actually aware and listening, right? And remember, like anytime you bring up something, you remember it better. So just know that, like, very, very good drill has been very helpful is, once you talk to someone, what was something interesting that you didn't know about them, and then write it down. Big idea number 5 is avoid arguments. Now, there's another side of this, but we'll talk about that later, right? So just know that all arguments are just two people who haven't yet agreed on a compromise, right? So when I say avoid arguments, it doesn't mean that sometimes you won't challenge people. And we'll talk about this on the radical candor side of things, right? Where I'm gonna bring this back, but it's like when you care deeply, you can challenge directly. But just know that when it's an actual argument, two people just haven't agreed on compromise. So what to do when in an argument? Strongly empathize with the other person. Ask yourself, why are they right and why am I wrong? Get to that middle ground as fast as possible. So why are they right and why am I wrong? Now look, some people will like start giving different advice on this, but the point of it is that, like, see, why are they right and why am I wrong? It builds on something that most people don't do well, self-awareness, right? Or even going like, hey, could I be wrong here, right? And then you might actually listen to them. So if you've ever studied or done Crucial Conversations, which is an incredible book and kind of like a process of getting better at communicating with people, period, in any area of your life, is like find, the pool of meaning, right? It's like you ask yourself this question, like, hey, what do I want? What do I want for them? What do I want for myself? And what do I want for us? And I like that when it comes to like the whole argument side of things, right? Because, interestingly enough, like last podcast, I talked about the toolbox, the coaching toolbox, and we talked about threat and safety and predictability, right? So as soon as you come into a conversation and you attack someone, I mean, it's just a spiral, right? It's a spiral. It's going to go nowhere because one person's in threat, the other person attacks back, then you're in threat, and then it goes nowhere. So somebody has to be the catalyst of, I would say, taking that pin out of the grenade. And you can't rely on others to do that because the only thing you have control of is yourself. So in that sense, asking yourself, why are they right and why am I wrong, is one of the ways that can, like I said, kind of put the pin back in the grenade and start the conversation to a place of where everybody wins, or I should say is like you can actually have a real conversation without the argument. Big idea number 6 is admit mistakes immediately. So know this: if you make a mistake at work, at home, don't hold on to it. Don't hide it because it'll come back to haunt you. And man, if there's ever anything that I probably want to do a whole podcast on, and that I fucked up on so many times, or I should say struggled with, was whenever like I made a mistake, knew it, didn't admit it, didn't kind of like stand up to it and address it, that like you just push it down and sedate because of your ego, right? The ego doesn't want to admit that you're wrong. And that comes back to haunt you. And it comes back to haunt you, when you care about people, it comes back to haunt you in the form of guilt and shame. Many times it can go outwardly into blame, right? And essentially it's like you never feel good about it, period. And it never does anything good. So, what to do when you make a mistake, immediately fess up to it, to all appropriate people, parties, organizations, whatever it is in this sense, right? But, making that a trait that you have will also build trust and, something that you just can't, like, I mean, it's priceless when it comes into the world of just relationships and business, period. Number 7 big idea is point out errors indirectly, right? So know this: when a subordinate, I love saying that word, subordinate, or anyone makes a mistake, do not point out their error publicly. And you might have heard this, like, hey, praise in public, and kind of bring out errors in private, or having tough conversations in private. So you know what to do in a private conversation. Let the person know how they can improve in the future. So make it a teaching moment. I think that's very, very important that like you could, and this comes back to like when we talked about coaching, like even on the gym floor in groups or on semi-private training or something like that, I do something called praise, correct, praise. And that's not, written in stone. It could be praise, correct, praise. There's a bunch of different things that you can do that. But the main point of it is that like you can say something indirectly and make it a learning lesson, right? And even ask the person like, hey, what could you have done here? That would be better. And then what you're going to do next. So that's a trait, because it's really easy to get pissed off. And, when you get pissed off, you're just like, man, you did this, you did that, right? We kind of come back to the argument and create threat. So that's a very, very important thing in a learnable trait. Big idea number 8 is share your own mistakes. Now, from a leadership standpoint, I think this is crucial. Even kind of like flowing over into the marketing landscape, I think that's important, because let's be real. Like I said this before, like quality marketing is just building a healthy human relationship, right? And I make this example of the problem of what most people do, like online is, just buy my shit, right? Or it's just like you treat it not like a normal, regular, healthy human relationship. So a lot of marketing is or sales is like, first date, like, hey, what should we name our baby? And it's like, whoa, back up, son. You know what I mean? Like, but that's the problem with it. And so sharing mistakes makes you more human. And it just shows that like you're just like everyone else, right? But people like people who are honest in their forthcomings, right? Like if that's one of your virtues and values, like that's something you should do. And like, hey, you know what? Like I definitely wasn't always like that, and because of my insecurities and ego. I'm not saying I don't have any anymore, but it's like you don't admit to mistakes because you try to always be like, man, I'm Mr. Perfect, right? And one of the best things I ever done was start doing that, like start sharing flaws and failures and fuck ups, and then also sharing the lessons from that, which kind of runs back to what we just mentioned earlier, right? But so what to do? Like, hey, when you make a mistake, especially if you're the boss, make it public, own it, tell everybody what you've learned as a result, right? Always say it, like in every failure, there's a lesson. And with that said, right, this can become a way that you operate, where it's just like, man, I messed up. Okay, what's positive about this? What's the lesson that I learned here? Okay, what am I going to do about this? What's the next action step, right? When you start operating like that, you start growing at exponentially, right? Exponentially. Big idea number 9 is recognize every effort to improve. So know this, there's no effortless way to jump from novice to mastery, right? It takes time and birth pains along the way. So I wouldn't even say, like, man, like without my pain, I don't have my strength, right? And you want to recognize that. So let's go back to like, hey, what to do, and we'll dig in a little bit, right? So when a person, whether it's a team member or a friend, makes some progress towards a larger goal, reward that step of the journey. And I know for a fact, like this is something that I can definitely still improve a lot on, but it's something I keep bringing up into my awareness, right? And notice it connects on like shining a positive light on people, like the things that people did well. Well, here it's just we're rewarding it, right? Because and like not necessarily creating an expectation, but when people do things well, you reward it. So important. And here's something I'll bring up too. Do that for yourself as well. I think that it starts there. I think that we lead others a lot of times the way that we lead ourselves. So, the reason why I work on like writing down my 3 wins for the day, reflecting on the week on what are the things that went well, and getting better, not there yet, but like getting better at like rewarding myself for like, man, you bust your ass for this. Like, hey, go do this, go on this trip, or maybe there's something that you wanted to get for a while, like do it, right? Because if you don't do it for yourself, it's going to be very difficult for you to do it for others as well. And honestly, it ends up being one of those two-way kind of streets where it's like, I do think when you do it for others, it maybe helps you do it for yourself more, and the other way around. But don't forget that, because sometimes people forget about themselves too, right? It's like, hey, maybe you're treating somebody else great, but you're treating yourself like shit. So that, recognize every effort to improve. it could be with your team, it could be with your friends, it could be with your family, but many times I'd say it's with yourself. And big idea number 10 is give people a reputation to live up to. So know this, like no matter how well you've done or how well you've continued to do, never lose your hunger. One of the things I think I saw it in like a Gold Cast or something, from Tony Robbins, and it was just talking about Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant and like some other people in different industries. What's the difference between them and even other people that do well, but never achieve like these like greatness? And it's just hunger, right? It's just straight up hunger, like the hunger for more, but not in a way like, the hunger for greatness, for the hunger to leave a legacy, right? It doesn't have to be scarcity based, or fear based. I mean, like, I guess like, I know mine is fear based from a standpoint that, man, I don't want to leave this earth not doing what I feel I can do, right? Not like unleashing my full potential, right? Because I love the quote. It's actually on my, I think, Facebook page, but it's, you can't choose your potential, but you can choose to fulfill it. And nobody comes, to the peak and exhaust every piece of their potential. But like if you push, and if you're hungry, like you'll get the closest to it. And there's purpose, right? Remember what I said at the beginning, like even the doctors that were doing all this research, they said, what is one of the, the 5 things? And one of the 5 things is purpose, right? Like people can have a lot of good things going on in their life, but if they don't have purpose, man, it's affecting their well-being. It's affecting their health. It's affecting everything. So what to do? Keep practicing your listening, growing yourself ownership, and giving your best each day. And, whatever that, like, I definitely think environments are a humongous part of that. And, so, choosing which environment you're in, like what you listen to, what you see, who you're around, all those different things are so important. Because like I said, like nobody but you can know the effort that you put out, but it's like, I can't remember. I think it was the book Give and Take, where it's talking about like people that were exhausted from their jobs, right? Because they were giving so much, but they weren't receiving in a form of fulfillment, right? And even though they were working these really long hours, when they ended up taking on ended up taking more on, but the additional thing that they took on was really purposeful and fulfilling to themselves, and they put in a ton of effort, they actually started getting less stressed and less tired and got more energy, right? So, and I'm not saying like, hey, add to your, if you're exhausted, add to your things, but like when you add stuff that fulfills you and like drives you and gets you excited and makes you happy, it could legitimately make you less tired than if you're doing less. You know what I'm saying? Like, because the stress of doing shit you don't love doing, and being fulfilled can I would say drain energy. And doing your best every day in itself is very fulfilling. I know, and especially if going back, right, you recognize your own efforts, right? If you're able to see the things that you've done and congratulate yourself, like that's rewarding, right? That's healthy for you. Because if you think about, like the whole horizon, right? We're always shooting to reach the goals and the horizon. And whenever you reach the point that you want it to go, then there's the next step, there's the next mountain, whatever, right? So that can be very stressful if you live in a cycle without acknowledging where you're coming from, without looking, I always say that there's this gap, right? There's a gap from where you are to where you want to be. But then there's also, when you look back, there's like, oh, wow, like, hey, look at this bridge that I built from where I was to where I am now, right? And acknowledging that allows you to not only step into your power and go like, hey, I've been successful, I can do this too, right? Like every time you I would say get down on yourself and you have doubt and stuff like that, man, stepping back into something into a time where you've been successful, looking back and going like, well, look, I was making $1,000 a month, now I'm making, $3,000 a month, man, great. Like, hey, I was this many pounds, now I'm this many pounds. Like, hey, I could lift this, now I could lift that. Like, hey, I can do this, man. I've already done this. Now this is just a new level, new devil, right? That's very, very important for us. And, in NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, like there's all these different methods of being able to, when you're feeling down and out of confidence, like there's strategies on, that I will even employ sometimes, which is visualization or going back to like, like when I would hit buzzer beaters or, get like tip dunks in a game and, you know, people's faces. I mean, it's right. But I mean, it's kind of funny, but it's real stuff, right? Like I'll close my eyes and go like, man, back to a time that was like stressful and it was challenging. And it was, man, I was like, I could feel the resistance, right? And I overcome it. And it's like, when you feel that, you're like, it gives you power, right? Like, man, I've done this, man. I've gone through this before. And maybe it's in a different realm, but I can do this again, right? I can do this again. So if nothing else, remember about this. These are quotables pretty much, right? There's just 3 things. Like if we're going to summarize this up, we couldn't really get to the radical candor part because we dug pretty deep into this. But number 1, you know, people care about people who care about them. People care about people who care about them, right? Always remember that. Number 2, do not be arrogant with your time. Constantly learn from others. Listen to what they say. I was just sharing my meetings, so phone meetings and physical meetings with my business coaching group yesterday. And it was like really long. And it's kind of like people always go like, holy shit, like you actually meet with this many people per week? And it's like, yes, I do. Because like the foundation, like legitimately, I reread this book, number 1, every year. Okay. How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I always get new stuff from it. I always get reminded. I always go like, man, I need to do more of this. But it's built a foundation to where like the reason why I love, you know, this type of business, like brick and mortar, is because I'm a people person. I'm a community person. And I love being around people and learning more about them and like seeing their greatness before they see it and then helping them get to there, right? Like, and for that, like you got to listen and you have to find a positive, and then you got to spend time with them and show that you care. So I would challenge you to do more of that. However much you're doing, you know, I know like one person that's like always impresses me, and we talk about this, man, because we're so on the same page about it, is you know, one of my best friends in the world, Jay Ferrugia, which if you're not listening to his podcast, like, man, I don't know what you're doing, the Renegade Radio, but same thing, takes so much time to create moments and experiences for not just his friends, but new people that he wants to meet and get to know and build relationships with, which is phenomenal. And I would ask yourself, how can you do more of that in your life? And like I said, like that's a big thing. And number 3, hey, be confident and precise, but be human first. Remember, ego is the enemy. And, you know, great book by Ryan Holiday, but here's just like literally the quote that like, you know, there's like certainty and confidence are way different, like than, because there's a fine line, right? Like you could have, like, everybody has ego, and ego can be like a good thing in many ways, but it can also destroy you. So being confident and certain comes from, number 1, belief. It comes from work, though. You know, like I think the main source of confidence is work, right? You do the work, you get the confidence. You know what I mean? You don't sit at home. I believe in visualization. I believe in like, hey, faith and belief. But if you're sitting at home and doing like sitting there and believing and kumbaya and you never do shit, like guess what? You're never going to build the confidence, right? So the confidence comes from the work. So, you know, that's how you gain confidence. But at the end, like always be human, like always build emotional and social intelligence just as much, because like when you can live in that world and just go like, I think Gary Vee said this to me in one of the meetings, but it's like, you know, like I'm massively confident, right? I'm massively confident in what I do. And then at the same time, I remember I'm just a fucking speck of dust in the universe, you know? And I do try to live by that, you know, and sometimes you veer off but you try to come back to it because, you know, like, man, like you can do anything, but like at the end of the day, we're just, you know, a speck of dust. And it's like, that keeps you humble enough and human to just really connect to people and really understand them and really feel them, you know what I mean? And I think this is a key to leadership. I think it's a key to influence. And there's a ton of other, you know, more tactical and strategic things, but like when we overview this, like these are some of the most important, I think the most important facets of, I guess, the foundation, right? The foundation, like if you don't have this foundation, man, nothing else on top of it tactical will work. Just like when I talk about marketing stuff, right? Like marketing is just the way you communicate. You know, if you have a shitty product or service, or you're not a great human being, you know what? Like you're just communicating about that, right? Marketing is just communicating about that. Or, you know, if your marketing is bullshit because those two don't match, right? So the audio doesn't match the video, which is what I like to say. And, you know, people see like this, whoa, awesome marketing. And then they come meet you or come into your business. And it's just like, man, none of this shit is the way that was communicated, right? You market yourself out of business. And I think there's still too many people these days. You know, I think in this new day and age, it's kind of like, man, spend 20% on the time and energy on the product and 80% on the marketing. And I'm like, nah, fuck that. Like, spend 80% of the time on the massive quality service of your product or should say product and service, and then 20% on the marketing, and see what happens, right? Take the next skier. Like if you're not happy with where your business is, like, and you know, I'm bringing things up business life, but specifically for business in this area, like if you're not happy with where it is, focus on what I just talked about, and then spend 80% of your time on the quality and greatness of your service and how you treat people. And like I said, like what you do, what problems you solve, and the quality of service and relationships you build, and then 20 on marketing. Flip it around and like see what happens to your business. And I would have you consider it's going to be in a way different place than it is. And with that said, as always, I hope you guys love this. I love talking about this stuff because it's just things that are, you know, very everyday for me from a standpoint of running teams and having coaching clients in all types of realms. And these are things that always come up, but this is life stuff, right? You get great at this, you make your life better. You build better relationship, you have better experiences. You know, you build your purpose and you get further than you ever thought that you could. And so with that said, as always, I really appreciate and love you guys tuning in. Like if you love this podcast, go to iTunes, give a 5-star review, you know, share your thoughts on it. Like I said, this is what drives a lot of people to hear it. And if it's, you know, if there's one thing that you can take from this, you know, and apply it into your life, and you keep doing that every week and you do it 52 times a year, your life will be in a better place. And so if you can share that so others can see that, and they also start listening to it, like, man, I'm grateful. I'm beyond grateful for that. But please do that. And thank you. I will see you guys in the next show. Luka's out. Peace.